Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Championship Showcase, Secrets for Success. From the playing field of competition to the field of life, we have been speaking with inspirational sports leaders, former athletes, coaches, administrators, sports psychologists, and related professionals who are sharing their life strategies and empowering messages of hope and purpose to support those athletes that are making or seeking to make a successful transition from the playing field of competition to the field of life. My name is Dominic Militello, and we're so glad you can join us. We have a lot to cover and not much time to cover it, so let's jump right in. Today we're speaking with the talented Jeff Woody. Jeff played football at Iowa State University from 2009 to 2013. During his time at ISU, he is most remembered for scoring the game-winning touchdown in double overtime against then number 2 Oklahoma State in 2011. In 2013, he would serve as co-captain for the Cyclones. All told, throughout his career, he is 18th on the all-time touchdown list, a 4-year starter and a leader in the locker room. Off the field, he was a 4-time All-Academic, All-Big 12 selection and co-president of the Student Athlete Advisory Committee. Prior to his senior year at Iowa State, he married his wife, Hannah, who has been a stalwart in his life. Jeff graduated with his undergraduate degree in kinesiology, pre-human medicine, and enrolled in the Masters of Science program in biomedical sciences. Following his senior year, he tried the NFL Combine and realized that dream wasn't for him. He finished his master's degree with an emphasis on concussion science. He currently works as a communications coordinator and quality improvement advisor at the Iowa Healthcare Collaborative, facilitating healthcare improvement. Jeff also works as a football analyst, appearing on ESPN, a weekly television show on the local ABC affiliate, a weekly radio program with the Big Ten analyst Chuck Long, and on the pregame show for the Iowa State home football games. He's also worked as an adjunct professor in physiology and biology at Des Moines Area Community College, all while his wife pursues her doctorate degree in nursing to be received in May of 2017. He enjoys reading, writing, golf, and watching any kind of sports, and when, if ever, gets the time to do all those things. Jeff's heartfelt blog that went viral about the death of his former teammate at Iowa State and Super Bowl champion with the New York Giants, Tyler Sash, is an inspiration to me and many others to work harder and longer to make sure athletes around the globe get the message of purpose and value after sport. You'll find the link to Jeff's blog attached to this interview. We're lucky to have Jeff Woody with us today. Jeff, welcome to the Championship Showcase.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Well, we know that you're very busy just reading your bio there, and especially with a new job at IHC, and we can't thank you enough for spending some time with us today. I'm excited to hear your thoughts on athletes transitioning and obviously your blog post, but before we get to that, can you give our audience some background and tell us a little bit about your upbringing?
So I went to Iowa State in college, and the reason I wanted to go there is because it was local. I grew up in Altoona, Iowa, which is just a suburb of Des Moines. If you don't know where Des Moines is, Google is a good place to look. It's the center and capital of the state, and it's definitely one of the more kind of white bread cities in the country. It's mostly, middle to upper middle class white people, and especially in the suburbs is kind of where you grow up. And my dad was an former Air Force guy and a former farmer, and so he was a hard work or nothing type guy. And so when I was growing up, it was always, if you're going to do something, you do something 100%. And well, when I was growing up, so like I said, I grew up just kind of outside of Des Moines, and Ames is only 45 minutes north of there. In the recruiting process, and I realized that I wanted to go to Iowa State because the head coach was honest. And for those of you that have ever been through recruiting, you know how much smoke is blown just at you. So, you're so great. You're gonna start here, and we think you can be all conference. Okay, you're gonna give me a scholarship? Well, no. Okay, then just don't lie. So the coach at Iowa State, Paul Rhodes, was straightforward. He was honest. He was great, and I don't regret that decision one bit. So I went to Southeast Polk High School, played running back there, got recruited and walked on at Iowa State. After my first season at Iowa State, I earned a scholarship, and I was on scholarship for the final 4 years of the Iowa State experience.
Nice, nice. And why were sports important for you growing up? Obviously, it sounds like you were driven from an early age, but what was it about sports?
Well, I've always loved competing, and my best friend growing up, he was the best man at my wedding, and I have a brother. So the fact that he was the best man over my brother says something about how kind of the relationship was with he and I. And whenever we would hang out together, from the time we were 5 to still to now, we would always do something to see who was better at stuff. And when we would do those things, it kind of naturally morphed itself to sports because we loved both kind of running around, and we were good at it. He ended up playing college tennis, so we're good at sports and good at stuff, and we loved playing around and competing, so that naturally lended itself to football. Well, I started playing because I was a bigger kid, and the game itself came really, really easy, and it was just one of those things. It was just a square peg, square hole. Like I was a fish in water when I started playing football, and so it naturally kind of morphed that way. And I ended up, in high school, and this is one thing that I can say, one little piece of advice before we get to the heavy advice is do as many things you can. If you're a high school kid, if you're a junior high kid and you're listening to this, play every sport that you can possibly get yourself in. And all the data is going to tell you, all the coaches at high levels are going to tell you, playing more than one sport is better for you both psychologically, physically, and mentally, and everything is better for your health when you play multiple sports. So I ended up playing football, wrestling, baseball, and track when I was in high school. And like I said, football was just the most natural fit. It was just, I'm a 6 foot, 230-pound dude. It kind of football's really the only option for that.
Right, right. Well, and there was a time when I think college coaches wanted you to focus in on one particular sport or whatever it was, but you're right. Now they're saying multiple sports is the way to go. What were some of the early life lessons that you got from competing at an early age?
Well, it was through my dad was one of the things, learning how to work, but actually learning what the fruits of labor looked like. Because in school, hard work does pay off, but it's a lot slower of a process because you don't know how much you know until you don't know it. And if you just always study and stay on top of your game, then you never have that experience of not knowing something. So school is a lot harder to see what hard work does, which is why another thing that athletics is so great for is because if I work harder than you for a week and we do sprints, I'm going to beat you. Like there's no kind of ifs, ands, or buts about it. So it's a quick, super, super fast kind of return on what hard work does. So one of the great things about sports is how much dedication it takes to get a positive outcome. So like being able to know that if I'm going to be working and I only have an hour and a half that I am going to be able to have the gym before the volleyball team kicks the football team out, then I know that I have to get all my work done in an hour and a half, and I can't slough around because the guys that slough around don't do as well as I do. So I need to make sure that I'm not one of those guys. So it taught the value of hard work and understanding what good work means. I think the other thing that sports naturally teaches is trust and teamwork, and those two are absolutely codependent on each other because I know that through sports and track and baseball and football are all good examples of this, specifically, relays and track, but that your team matters and that you have to be able to trust that someone else is going to get their job done. So you learn how to delegate and not try and do too many things. So I can focus on being really, really good at this one thing or these couple things, and I know that as a baseball player, I know that I don't have to work on pitching because I play center field. So when I play center field, I know that I need to work on where to place my eyes when the ball comes off the bat, and I know that I need to work on being in the cage because that's my role. So I can work on those things and just trust that the other guys are going to do their work. So trust and hard work and teamwork are kind of the big things that I got out of athletics that I don't think you can replicate anywhere else.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. It sounds like you were self-driven. Who were some of your coaches, mentors, teachers in high school that helped prep you for the rigors of college life?
I think I had 3 really, really good mentors, and I would have had 4. say if it wasn't for injury. So I wrestled up until, I'll say this caveat, I wrestled up until my sophomore year, and then after my sophomore year I stopped wrestling. After my junior year, I had a high ankle sprain in the last game of the season, so I was missing 6 weeks. So basically I had 2 weeks of wrestling, so I just decided not to do it. And then to come back for my senior year after missing my junior year, for those listening that wrestle, Southeast Polk is a national top 10 team. So if I missed a year, there was no way that I was going to get back on varsity. So yeah. I just decided not for the final 2 years. But to answer the question, the 3 really good motivators and kind of preparers that I had were actually all coaches. And the reason why they were is because they didn't stress what you did so much as who you were. And the big thing on that is that I was on a state playoff team every single year, and we went to the finals in every sport that we played in because the coaches were so good at fostering that team atmosphere. And it doesn't matter who you are individually so much as who you are individually on the field so much as it matters who you are to the other guys. And they were so good at getting everyone on the same page. And those coaches were Brad Zelenovich, my offensive coordinator in football, Scott Belger, my baseball coach, and Nate Smith, my track coach. Were all 3 that were just fantastic guys at yes, they got the best out of you in athletics, but they got the best out of you in just fostering that trust within your teammates that you're important on the field, yes, but you're more important within this team. So those are the 3 guys that I can point to the most in high school specifically that did that.
Right. Well, it sounds like you were developing the attributes as a complete student athlete. Your hard work, dedication, the trust, all that must have obviously carried over. Well, it obviously did carry over to college. Talk about your experience at Iowa State and playing football there.
That's a big chunk to chew. So I came in, like I said, as a walk-on, and when you come in as a walk-on, you have like the scholarship guys think they have a chip on their shoulder when they don't get recruited by the school they want to. Yeah, try paying for your school. So when you come in as a walk-on, like you have the biggest chip on your shoulder because no one thinks you're good enough to do what you're doing. So when you're talking about specifically football, it was one of those things where like I knew that every single scholarship guy that I came in, I had to get there before him and I had to leave after him. And when I was there, I had to work harder than he did. And so that was my kind of the football attitude is like, I need to do this. And then kind of the competitor in me is I got to academics and I was like, well, I have to get better grades than all these guys too, just because that, it's going to make me better on the field.
Right.
Well, because of that competitiveness, I was like trying really hard, but not knowing what to do. So even though I was all academic for 4 years, I was at Iowa State for 5. That first year, my GPA was 2.79 because I had no idea what study skills were. So that was a hard adjustment year, but it was kind of swinging in the dark. And then I credit my getting my academic performance and personal performance, just being a better person to, like I said, my wife. And at the time, she was my girlfriend, and we were high school sweethearts for our just before our senior year. She's a spitfire, and it's fantastic. Where she has, especially with me, well, her dad is the CEO of the Iowa Hospital Association, which is kind of a partnering organization with where I work right now. But her dad's the CEO of a company, and she has that same type attitude where she does not put up with disrespect. She does not put up with any bullshit. She absolutely calls it as it is. And if I would ever think that I was, living large and being better than I was and thinking that I, earned the right to do something, she'd be like, who do you think you are? And she would, not in a mean way, and she wouldn't obviously say it like that, but she'd bring me right back down to earth of going, okay, yeah, you play football, great, but you have a 2.79. What's that going to do for you?
Right.
She was great at kind of teaching and focusing and funneling the energy that I was putting into it into a proper direction and understanding that just working hard to work hard doesn't do anything for you.
Yeah, right, exactly. So she was able to kind of keep you grounded. It sounded like keep you grounded during that first couple years, and then at some point it sounds like you may have just taken off academically and athletically. When was that moment? Do you remember?
Well, I don't think that was until probably the second semester of my junior year, which would have been my third year at Iowa State. So prior to my redshirt sophomore football year, it was my junior academic year. Prior to the spring semester, that it finally clicked, and I understood what it meant to be a person, as opposed to what it means to be just some guy who plays football and goes to school. Because you can do both those things, but if you never really appreciate who you are, then you're just doing the things to do the things as people tell you to do them. And that was through her kind of insistent pushing. And there were times when it was she basically said, I can't do this anymore. And there were times when that happened, and I mean, God bless her for staying around, but it was because of that, it finally clicked with me, and then it was like, okay, well, I'm now me, and and being able to take that and transition that. So after that semester, like I said, it was something that finally made a lot of sense, that I knew who I was, that I could be okay with not having to swing and try so hard to just be myself.
Wow. Great lesson there, huh?
Yeah, I tell you what, like, if you get to meet my wife, she is an absolute privilege to meet. She's a fantastic person. Like I said, I wanted to include that note in there. Kind of a competitiveness, but just more tongue-in-cheek competitiveness. So I got my master's in May of 2013. At the time, she was just finishing up her first year in her doctorate program. So she's getting her doctorate of nursing practice. She'll be a nurse practitioner. So I'm gonna be more educated than my wife for a grand total of 2 calendar years, and that's it. So
you better enjoy it.
I know. I gloat as much as I can. I have the MS after my name in an email, so when I send it to her, I can highlight it and say, hey, I still have this degree until May of next year.
Jeff, lead us up to the Oklahoma State game in 2011. Obviously, it was a big moment in your life and those around you and your teammates and all that. What was going on up to that game, and maybe walk us through the touchdown?
So up until that point, we were good, and don't get me wrong, we had 8 NFL players on our team that year. So one of which is A.J. Klein, who is a linebacker for the undefeated Panthers. One of them is Kelechi Osemele, who's right now injured, but he has a Super Bowl ring. He was a starting guard for the Ravens when they won it. We have a couple other guys that are still kind of ping-ponging around in the NFL, and then a couple guys that were just roster guys. But anyway, we had 8 NFL guys in that roster, but we're playing in the Big 12, so it's just a gauntlet of a conference. And we had 5 wins at the time, and going to play the number 2 team in the country, which is Oklahoma State. They were undefeated at the time, coming in on a Friday because they were coming up from a Saturday game, and we played them on a Friday. So they only had 6 days to come off it. We had a bye week prior to that game. 2 days before the game, they had Oklahoma State had the basketball team, the women's basketball team, and a couple staff were riding on that. They were in a private plane. The private plane crashed. Right. So that Oklahoma State team was playing with heavy hearts, and they came into Ames, and kind of mixing all the concoction together. They were up 24-7, and we started to push back. And we started to fight back, and we started to score, and we started to get the game back to a really competitive level. And I think they just ran out of juice, and they just didn't have enough emotion to counter what we were doing. So we end up, it was 24-7, like I said, in the middle of the third quarter, actually, and we end up coming back and we tie it, and they have the opportunity to win the game on a field goal with about a minute 30 left. And they had their kicker had won the Groza Award prior to that year. So the year before, he was a semifinalist. He was a semifinalist. He went to New York to be there for the award. So he was top 3 best kickers in the country. And there was like a 41 or 39 or something like that yard field goal, and he missed it wide right. And that was with 1:30 to go, tie game. He missed it wide right. It went right over top of the upright.
Yeah.
So he missed that, and we go into overtime. And the first call in overtime, we ran a throw because Oklahoma State had the ball first. Excuse me. Oklahoma State had the ball second. We had the ball first. So in the first overtime, we ran kind of a throwback to our running back, who wasn't me. I was not fast enough to run this play. I was the stereotypical white guy. I was the big, physical, coachable, hardworking, gritty.
Right.
But we ran a throwback to our running back, who scored in the first play. They then got the ball, and the team of Brandon Whedon, Justin Blackman, that offense, they end up matching the score. Then we go into the second overtime. And in the college overtime rules, if one team starts the ball and then the other team gets a chance to answer, so they trade. So if I start on offense and you start on defense, then the next overtime you start on offense and I go to defense. So they start with offense, and the first play of the game, one of our linebackers, who was an NFL guy for a year and a half, saw that Justin Blackman was playing in the slot. Well, Blackman, he was a true wideout. He was a ex-receiver. I mean, a guy that was 2 yards from the sideline every single time. Well, they saw that he put him in the slot, and he goes, okay, this is not right. They're going to target him. I know that they're going to go towards him. So Jake Knott's his name. His coverage, they're actually playing a zone coverage that meant he was going to kind of float away from where the route ended up going. Well, Blackman ended up trying to run like a square in behind him. Well, Jake saw the route, jumped underneath it, got a hand on the ball, tipped it up. Our safety intercepted it on the very first play of scrimmage. So now all we have to do is not fumble and get points, because any point will win the game at that point, because we got the interception to end their possession.
Right.
So all we have to do is get points. So at this point, during the season, we traded off kickers. It was one of those ones where we had a guy to start the year. He missed like 6 in a row. Then had to bring in another guy. Well, that guy couldn't make kicks outside of like 50 yards or outside of like 45 yards. So the first guy would kick 45-yard field goals, and the other guy would kick inside that field goal. So understandably, the fans and the coaching staff didn't have a ton of faith in those guys. So they were preferring that they didn't have to use them. But if we knew that if we got inside, the 10, 15-yard line, one of our kickers is basically automatic from inside there. So we were like, okay, don't fumble. After we got that interception, I was just celebrating on the other side of the field and just losing my mind. Well, one of the coaches comes and grabs me and goes, hey, we got to go, and you're in. And I was like, sweet. So he comes and grabs me. We run down. We get the play call. Our offensive coordinator at the time was Tom Herman, who was the offensive coordinator for the Buckeyes last year when they won the championship, and now he's the head coach at Houston, where he has one loss. So he's a pretty damn good football coach.
Right.
Anyway, in that overtime, we ran 2 tight ends, which we hadn't really done a lot of, and ran an inside zone play, and we run a spread. So an inside zone is basically the equivalent of running power in an I set. So we run inside zone, and the first play gets like 8 yards, and that was to me. And the fans were like, okay, we're going to just kick a field goal to win. And we get 8 yards, and we're like, oh, this is nice. And you could feel the tempo, like the tone of the crowd was increasing. Then we run the same play again, and that play gets 15 yards, and we get down to the 4. And it was kind of crazy, and it made me look really cool, because they weren't trying to tackle me. They're just trying to strip the ball, because the tackle doesn't do them any good, because we can still kick a field goal. They had to get a turnover in order to stay in the game. So they weren't trying to tackle me. They were trying to strip the ball. So I was, squeezing the absolute life out of that ball. So just a complete death grip on that thing. At one point in that second run, I was suspended in the air because there was 2 guys that had both hands on my arms, and I am trying to make myself as heavy as I possibly can to get my butt to the ground.
Right.
Well, anyway, on the third play, we run the exact same play for the 3rd time in a row. I end up scoring. We win the game. 52,000 people storm the field. Fun fact, the Northwestern Mutual is the Northwestern Mutual commercial where that crowd is storming the field. The very first shot of that commercial, well, that's that game. So
wow.
I mean, they're flooding the field, and everyone is having a great time. And I got to do an interview with different ESPN. I mean, Mark Schlabach was there. It was one of the coolest experiences of my life. And it was the most fun, life-threatening mob I've ever been a part of.
Wow, great story. Well, we're going to hang on to that story for a long time, Jeff. Thanks for sharing. No, really, I mean, that's exciting stuff. Let's transition, if you will, no pun intended, to our topic, though, and talk a little bit about, obviously, dedication, hard work, captain of the football team, game-winning touchdown, the whole works. When did you realize, was it the combine where you felt like maybe the next level was not an option for you?
Yeah, so that was my sophomore year when we had that game, and when I got to my senior year, it was, as every football player can tell you, your body starts to go, all right, this is not as enjoyable anymore. I mean, Sundays suck. So you're getting beat up, but you still, like, you watch games on Sunday and you're like, that is like one of the coolest things. I mean, that is so cool to play in the NFL. It's a dream that every 7-year-old kid has.
Right.
You know, able or not, you want to play in the NFL. And then you know that Pro Day's coming, and you know the Pro Day is going to be in March, and you're training for Pro Day. And I actually had a pretty solid Pro Day. I was 6 foot, 244 at the time, and had 21 reps on the bench, 4.67 hand time 40, 4.27 pro agility, and as a fullback, those are all like pretty solid numbers. But
yeah.
as a fullback, they don't draft fullbacks unless you're an absolute monster. And I was good but not great in college. So we do Pro Day, and as I'm doing Pro Day, we're doing the training for it, and I love doing the training for it because it give me more opportunity to hang out with the guys, the teammates that I had, and
right.
Then you get to the actual day itself, and you're obviously it's a cattle show for Pro Day. Everyone who's done it knows that it's just put these tight clothes on, stand on this scale, do this test, bench this thing, jump this thing, run this thing, and you're getting sized up, and it feels weird, but that didn't bother me that much. I think the thing that I noticed that I was sort of feeling beforehand is that my greatest joy during Pro Day was watching somebody else do well. Like, yeah, I did really good. I did really well in my 40. 4.67 hand time for a 244-pound dude, that's cooking. I'm proud of that. I'm cooking for a white guy. So I did that, but I think like I said, my joy was more in watching someone else succeed, and in talking to the guys, like I said, from that team, that at 8 that we had in 2001 or 2011, we had more in the next year. Talking to those guys in the NFL, that you don't get that same joy because if somebody else does well in your position group, that means you're potentially not going to have a job.
Right.
So rooting for someone else to do well, it wouldn't really work. And so it kind of hit me at that point of like, you know what, this probably is not for me. And then tie on top of that my my master's degree that I was getting, I was in my second semester of my master's program at the time. Like I said, my emphasis in biomedical sciences was concussion research. So knowing that, and I talked with my wife, who was at the time my wife, still is, but at that point in time we were married. And I was talking with my wife, and we were like, you know what? If I'm going to get my brains bashed in for however many years, 1, 2, 5, 10 years, and I want to do it for like an exorbitant amount of money. And because you weigh the whole length of life, quality of life thing. Like
right.
if we make $500,000 a year, I can put 1 year's salary in a bank account, and all of our future kids have a full ride scholarship to every school that we could want to. And I would live the dream of playing in the NFL, and you get to stay connected to the game for a long time. But so if the reward was out there, and I knew that I had a pretty good shot at it, then I'd be willing to do it because I knew I had a pretty good idea of the risk, and I knew how to prevent against those things happening. But I would have to have a pretty good idea that on the other side of that, I was going to get a decent guarantee at that type of life-changing money. So I get a call from the Cardinals and the Falcons at the time, and this was after the draft because I obviously didn't get drafted. So this is the night after the draft, or the night of the 7th round. So the 7th round finishes about 3 hours later. I get a call from the Falcons and the Cardinals, and they say, "Hey, we'd like you to come try out for. We'd love for you to be a fullback, try out for a fullback position we have in our offenses." And I go, "Okay, thank you. What? And then I knew this because of Pro Day that I needed to have a really good idea that I was going to get there. They said, I asked, what are my chances to get there? What are my chances that I'm going to make the active roster? What's my best case scenario? And they said, we watched your film, and you just don't have a lot of true fullback experience, which is true. I played tailback mostly. You just don't have a lot of true fullback experience. So if you come here and you do well, then you could be a special teams guy. We don't use a fullback a ton, but we like to have him here. And maybe you're an every down guy, but we really see that you could be a really good special teams guy for us, and potentially a pretty good chance at being a scout team fullback if you're not there. And I'm like, okay, scout team makes pretty good money. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would love $85,000 a year, but $85,000 a year is not exorbitant in my book. And
right.
If I'm gonna bash my brains in, I want to do it for $500,000, which an active roster is $440 league minimum. So unless you can pretty much guarantee that I'm going to be an active roster guy, I don't think that it's the thing for me. And they said, well, we've contacted about 6 other fullbacks, and I go, you know what, I appreciate the offer, but I think my body and my heart are telling me that I'm done with playing the game, and I think I'm good to go on my own terms. Yep. And they respected the decision. So thank you to those organizations, the Falcons, the Cardinals, if you're not trying to push and be aggressive with that. So that was kind of my story of realizing that both kind of mentally, physically, emotionally, I was just done with the game, and I wanted to go out in my own terms and not ping pong around in the Arena League and try and make it 2 years down the road and pull the Kurt Warner route of 6 years out of college, you end up getting the NFL. I knew that wasn't what I wanted.
Has it been easier or harder than you thought, your transition?
I think it's gone in waves. And initially when you get out, you're like, man, this is great. I have so much time. I can just focus on school. I'm just going to focus on school. Look what I'm going to do. And you have time. And all of a sudden that time is, okay, I am bored as shit. And not having that structure of, all right, this is what you're doing at this time, and this is what you're doing at this time, and this is what you're doing at this time, and this is where you're going to be able to get your physical kind of energy needs out. And people are not so much unlike children. Like adults are not so much unlike children, where if you don't get a kid active and exercising, that kid's a turd for the rest of that evening. And people are kind of the same way, where if you're used to a certain level of activity and you don't get that activity out, then you're like, okay, I got to go do something. So it was this weird kind of physical thing for the first little bit. And then it was easy, and then it got harder and wanting to get something done. And then it got easier again because I found a different job that I was working pretty well, and I was doing enough in school, and my wife was there. And then football season rolled around. And August of last year, it got very hard, because you look at it and you go, you see somebody score a touchdown, and that celebration you have in the end zone, or that celebration that's on the sidelines, and you go watch a practice and you see the joking, kind of that shoving and stuff like that, and that camaraderie and part of the team, and then you see 60,000 people cheering for somebody other than you, and you're like, man, I miss this. And
right.
Then 3 months later, and you see the end of the year, and you see people getting hurt, and you're like, okay, I'm good with not playing that anymore. And then you see bowl games, and you're like, man, bowl games are fun, and you start missing it again. So I think just very recently, it's come to the point where I'm completely fine with it. And it's taken, that was March of 2013 when I finished with Pro Day. March of 2014 when I did Pro Day. So it's taken since, I would say, probably May of this year because I finally got my degree. I think May of this year I finally felt okay with myself after being done. And it's not that it was always hard, and it's not that it was always easy. It was just that it came and went in waves of wanting to be back and being okay with being done, and then wanting to be back and being okay with being done. I went through this whole season, and I was like, I am good with not playing. So I at this point, we've officially cleared the hurdle of wanting to be back.
Nice, nice. You're listening to the Championship Showcase, Secrets for Success. From the playing field of competition to the field of life, we've been speaking with the talented Jeff Woody. Jeff, get to the point in where you were writing with the situation with Tyler, will you? And talk to us a little bit about your blog post and those emotions that you were expressing in your blog post regarding Tyler Sash, and give our audience maybe a little bit of background on that too, will you?
Talk about a stark transition. So Tyler Sash was a former Hawkeye football player, and Iowa State and Iowa were rivals. Iowa is on the east side of the state, and Iowa State's in the center of the state. So it's kind of two, probably 100 miles apart, and huge rivals. I mean, it's as big as there is in the state. As with Iowa State football games going on, I think the state's population is like 3.3 million. You're going to have, 1 million empty homes because they're all, or 1 million empty streets because they're all watching the game. And so we were rivals when we played, and I actually played against him, and his teams absolutely kicked our ass. It was, when he played, it was combined score was 70-3 when we played Iowa combined. And he was 2 years older than I was, and he ended up playing in the NFL. He left early from Iowa after his junior season to play in the NFL, and he was on the Giants team that their most recent Super Bowl, he was on that team. So Tyler had come back after he had he kind of bounced ping-ponged around the NFL. He had a couple injury issues. He had I think he had a substance issue, and then he had come home, and I got to work with him because it's Iowa and Iowa State, and it's a 50-50 state, or at least the Des Moines is 50-50. Eastern Iowa is almost all Iowa, but so I'd say 60-40 Iowa to Iowa State in the state. But because those are the big markets, we did a TV show in Des Moines that I worked with him, and I didn't know him that well when he was playing. He's from a high school probably 45 miles away from mine. So I got to work with him for most of the season when I was doing that show, which was actually last year. Well, fast forward, earlier this year, he was found dead in his home, and because I didn't know him that much, but when you did interact with him, you could tell that there was just something missing in him. And he was one of those guys that he loved playing football and absolutely lived for it. And then when it was gone, he didn't know what to do. And so I got to work with him, and I knew him enough. Obviously, I wasn't friends with him, and I regret not being there. But because I knew him well enough, like my heart just hurt because I'm like, I could have done so much more to help you. And I could have done so much more talking on TV about or media or personal interaction, just something more to make you feel more important. And I didn't. And so I get the news on a Tuesday, and I couldn't sleep. And it was 1 o'clock in the morning, and I just pulled out my laptop. And it's one of those things that, for me, the way that I get emotion out is I have to see it. Because I have so many emotions going in my head and my heart, and I can't process what's going on, that when I write them down, then I can actually decipher what my head's telling me to feel. And I can go, okay, this is what it is. So I got the first couple paragraphs out, and it's talking about how we don't know, at the time we didn't know the cause of death, and it's going through continuing autopsy. It was an overdose of medication. The intent was not ever defined. There was I don't think it was deliberately intentional, and I can't speculate anything past that, but nevertheless, he's not here anymore. And so I'm writing this, and I get the first few paragraphs down, and it's just talking about how, like I said, how much more I could have done and how much I didn't do, and then talking about how just terrible it was that we and myself included, value athletes as athletes, and then when they're done. I mean, whatever, it's fine, get out of here. And it's not just athletes in general, it's just how you identify yourself as a person, like the roles that you assign yourself. So I think for Tyler, the roles that he assigned himself was a Hawkeye, was a football player, and those are the two biggest ones that he had. And obviously there were more. There's way more to Tyler than that. But those are two of the biggest ones. And then when those are removed, there is this big gaping hole. And that I felt that. And those times, like I was talking about, when it was up and down and I was excited to be there and excited to be done, and then all of a sudden I would really miss playing because I didn't have that role to keep my person up, that it was gone. And I could tell that Tyler was dealing with the same thing, that he didn't have all of himself there. And that I felt so bad for not building up more of him, Tyler, and less of him, football player. And that was just what I couldn't figure out what I was feeling, and that's what it ended up coming out, that I regret so badly not doing enough or more to help.
What would you say, knowing what you know now, what would you tell him if you could, if knowing maybe what he was going through, what would you tell him? What would you say to him?
It wouldn't be one thing. It would just be like, hey man, you want to go hang out? I mean, let's go do something. Let's go play golf. Let's go watch TV. Let's go do something. And to get to know him, and to get to know his stories, and get to know what he likes, what he doesn't like. And when he ever starts, and knowing that when that conversation does come up of the glory days, and when the conversation does come up and about, playing football and that kind of stuff, just realizing that that's important, but that's one part of you. Like, what else is there? And digging more into who he was, because the more you realize who you are, the more you can accept who you are. So it wouldn't be one thing that I would do of saying, obviously you'd say, you're a great person, you're more than that, but that's not going to do much. It's just going to be, it's a continuous thing of saying, I know that you're more than who you are, and I want to find out who that is.
Well, it sounds like it's what your wife did with you early on in your college career, right?
She did, but she knew more. I mean, we'd been dating for, at the time, we started dating in 2008, and so she knew me better than I knew me. And when I would start to get these things, when I would start to get, too big-headed, like I said, or start to get too much in the glory days and start to get too much into, well, I did this, so I don't have to do this, she'd be like, who do you think you are? And remind and constantly take away that kind of big-headed thing, that big-headed attitude that I had, but also when I was feeling down, being like, you're a great, brother, you're a great friend, you're a great teammate, you're a great boyfriend, all these things of just being encouraging to more than just that one thing that I thought that I was.
How much of concussion and head trauma do you think played a factor in at least Tyler's situation?
I have no idea.
Yeah. And
I think, so personal interjection on science here, we are, I think, in the scientific community, I think they're pretty sure that concussions are correlated highly to CTE. And they know that that's a huge, huge, huge factor. And I don't think there's any debate in that. But why do some guys have it and some don't? And I think that's one of the big deals of, so what's preventing the guys that don't have it? What is stopping them? Is it some type of lifestyle choice? Is it some type of genetic component? Is it some type of substance choice? Is it some type of mental activity level that when you're in or out of the game, what is preventing those guys that didn't have it from having it? So although concussions are a really highly correlated factor of CTE, and we know that they're one of the potential causes for it, I don't think that there's enough evidence out there right now that say concussions one-to-one cause CTE. So I think with all these situations that are out there, of course the ones that are negative get publicized, and like the junior seiyas and stuff, they're definitely out there. And you can say that CTE killed some people, but we don't know that football caused that caused football or concussions directly one-to-one caused what that problem was. So do I think that concussions potentially played a part? Yeah. But do I think that concussions were one of the main things? I don't know.
Hard to say, yeah. Yeah. Do you think the whole topic of athletes transitioning gets enough attention in the general public?
I don't think so at all. And I'm going to take this outside of just athletics. that's soldiers too. That's widows. That's widowers. It's when you identify yourself so long and so heavily as one thing, and that thing's gone, there has to be a process of going through what it means to be you now. So like getting through the process of, I am no longer Jeff Woody, football player. I am no longer, John Smith, Marine. I am no longer, Jane Doe, wife of John. I'm no longer these things. So there has to be a change. And I think one of the things that we don't do a good job of as a society, as not just in America, but just as people, is helping people through those things, because I don't think we understand it enough, that we don't get what's going on in our brain to make us who we are. So when those things are removed, we don't get how to fix it because we don't understand that there's a problem. So I think there's a dearth of information in what's going on transitioning out of major life events.
What 3 pieces of advice could you and would you give somebody? Obviously, it's a longer process than that, but if you had somebody that you knew was going through it and you only had 5 or 10 minutes with them sitting in an airport or something like that, and knowing what you know now, where you couldn't put all the time in that you talked about a minute ago with Tyler, but you just had a few minutes with somebody, what would you tell them? What kind of wisdom would you give them?
Always ask who you are, and ask yourself that question seriously. And the first response that comes to your head is probably the biggest thing that you are. So when you look in the mirror and go, Jeff Woody, who are you? Does the first thing that come to your mind, I'm a football player? Well, if the first thing that comes to your mind is, I'm a football player, then that tells you right away that there is something that's a disconnect between who you really are as a person and what you do. And I think the biggest piece of advice that I could tell anybody is always ask yourself and evaluate, who are you? The second thing is, what am I going to do if one of these things is gone? Well, am I good enough, am I whole enough as a person that if one of these things is removed, I can exist? So if you are, the first thing you identify yourself, say the first thing you identify yourself is, I'm a son. My mom's always been there for me, and she was a single. This isn't true, but say she was a single parent. My mom has always been there for me. At some point, mom's going to die. Now, what is that going to do to me? So I need to be able to identify myself, yes, as a son, and be the most loving, adoring son that I possibly can. But I also have to be more than that. I have to be more than just son to mom. I have to be, boyfriend. I have to be friend. I have to be all these things, more of just yourself, to do more things, to be more things, to relate to more people than just one thing. I don't know if I have a true third one, but always just constantly be revising, not revising, but reviewing that information in your head of, who am I? If you're sitting in an elevator, you're waiting in traffic and you're stuck, and you're having just one of these moments because you're waiting to go to a job interview for the 5th time that you haven't gotten, who am I? What do I do? What am I here for? And understanding that if that answer isn't what you want right away, then you can change it, and you can do different things. You're not stuck with what that answer is, because you can constantly revise that thing. So analyze who you are, analyze what happens if that thing is gone, and then know that you can always change anything that you see.
Tremendous stuff. Jeff, we're out of time. We certainly hope everybody out there has enjoyed our conversation with the incredible Jeff Woody. I know I have. You've been listening to the Championship Showcase, Secrets for Success, from the playing field of competition to the field of life. Jeff, we could go on, and there's so many things I'd like to talk to you about: leadership, accountability, belief systems, all that. We're out of time today, but do you have any last thoughts for our audience before we officially sign off today?
Just that same thing. Always ask who you are, and don't be afraid of the answer, because if it's not what you want, you can change what it is. So never just settle for, well, I'm a football player, or, well, I'm a divorcee. That's it. That's all I'm going to be known as. No, you're not. You can be so much more than just that one thing, but always be asking yourself that question.
Wonderful. We want to thank Jeff Woody for joining us today, and we encourage those of you who feel you might need some assistance through your career transition, please reach out, get the necessary help you need, talk to somebody, ask the questions, keep doing those evaluations of yourself. Believe me and believe Jeff, you have purpose and you have value. For Jeff Woody, I'm Dominic Militello. For now, we want to wish you all the best always. We'll catch you next time.